Hi there, welcome back, Intellectuals, to another episode of Tanstwocents, where unfiltered strategies meets real world success. I'm your host, Tanwilson, and today we're going to cut through a lot of the noise with our guest who knows how to make sense of Washington, D.C.'s legal whirlwind. Josh Duval is a seasoned government contracts attorney, policy expert, and advocate for clarity on chaos. And today we're going to be tackling some pretty heavy hitting very dense topics that will directly affect your bottom line. And the recent DOGE changes, the Trump era executive orders, and making the rounds again, GSA's push for acquisition consolidation and perhaps some disruptive move yet. Talking about the potential FAR rewrite. And so there are not a lack of updates that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to try to jam a lot into one episode. So, Josh, welcome to the show and say hello to our listeners who we call intellectuals.
Hello, everybody. Delighted that you've joined us for this. What will probably be a dense but hopefully light-hearted topic of topics. All things government contracting, executive order, DOGE, etc. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Ton, for inviting me to participate, and I guess we'll get going here in a moment.
Yeah, for those who don't know you, Josh, you and I have been friends and colleagues for a while, and we are both emeritus chairs of AFCEA Small Business Committee. But for those who may not be aware of your background, tell us a little bit about your background and your firm and what it is that you do in GovCon.
Yeah, no, that was a while ago. I'm a big supporter of small business. I'm a government contracting nerd, as they say, GovCon nerd. I think Anna Ehrman maybe have coined that phrase. I, you know, there's so much to talk about when we think about government contracting um, that I really, you know, sad as this is, I find myself just reading cases for fun,
Oh,
just to
no.
stay on top of things. Yeah, so I'm, a quintessential government contracts attorney. You know, litigate bid protests. I help contractors on the pre-award protests and the post-award protests, size and status protests at SBA, navigating the just dense Title 13 regulations that govern joint ventures or mentor protege issues. In helping contractors with internal investigations to responding to government subpoenas to M&A issues. I sort of get my hands in a lot of if it touches the FAR or any of its supplements or otherwise impacts a government contractor, chances are I'm somehow involved. And so that's sort of what I've made of a career. Fortunate to be able to do this. Is something that I really enjoy. I've been able to testify before the House of Representatives on government contracting issues. I run a blog that I try to uh, maintain with up to date, and timely information that impacts, from a pragmatic perspective, not
Yeah.
just this case does X, but like here's how you can use a takeaway from it to impact your future endeavors in the government contracting space. But and my background's in cyber of all things, so
Oh, wow.
folks come to me with their cyber questions, and I'm fortunate to have been entrenched in that community as well. And so there's a lot of, as we all know, changes that are coming down the pike that impact government contractors with respect to cyber. So that's another thing to just be top of mind. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably the shortest. Yep.
And we're not going to talk about CMMC today. So, like, yes,
No,
so Josh can talk about.
we're shelving that. If you're wondering if we're going to talk about it, no, we're going to put that on the shelf because there's so many other things that are happening. There's probably things that are happening that are germane to your business right now. All right, we're just
Yeah.
not, we don't have our web pages open to the White House's executive order section, but I'm sure there's something coming out that in the next, if it's not today, it's tomorrow, that's going to have an impact on the government contracting space, as we have seen through DOGE and all the other EOs. So fun times, but as I tell people, it is almost as if I were drinking from a fire hydrant. There's just so much information to consume. And so, how do you figure out how to navigate all of it without sort of running in circles?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you a warm up question that had to
Hmm.
do with the FAR, but I'm going to table that because that whole conversation might lead us down a whole different rabbit hole. But you're right. Like as we speak, there could be things going on, and we do record these episodes in advance. So I may have to hurry up and produce this really quickly. Otherwise, this content might be not
It could be
germane
stale.
anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly. Oh,
really
there's a,
could.
well,
It's a
depending on
shuffling.
how, yeah, well, there's courts are involved and there's just a lot of activity. So it's fun, but it's chaotic. But at least it gives us something to talk about. And so I'm excited to be here for that nonetheless.
Yeah. And I guess gone are the days that says that the government moves so slowly that, we used to, I used to measure how long a government program's been in existence based on how old my son is. And so what my son's 15 years, so it's probably in its
Hmm.
third life cycle. You can't measure those changes in GovCon anymore based on that. So, yeah, I'm just going to cut to the chase and start off with our first segment here, which
Sure.
depending upon how you want to talk and call it, like DOGE changes. Some people call it doggy. I refuse to call it that. I'm going to call it DOGE. But let's just kind of start with the changes. And for those of you who are not familiar and have been living under a rock, DOGE is the Department of Government Efficiency. And they have been rolling through and rolling out some updates that are supposed to streamline the processes, but let's be honest, efficiency in policy doesn't always equal, ease for contractors. And sometimes it causes more headaches than what it, actually is trying to solve. So
Hmm.
Josh, can you kind of break down what some of these changes mean for the GovCon community? And what our intellectuals and contractors need to do to kind of prepare for them? So, like, translation, like, how do we get our house in order, or
Hmm.
risk kind of being benched or being put out of business?
So that's a good question. I think, I think when we think about efficiency, I think the thing that contractors need to think about is the genesis of what the government's trying to accomplish, right? The administration's America First priorities, right? And so we saw a memorandum. I'll give this example a couple weeks ago, or maybe it may have been in early February, um, from the Department of Defense about reviewing contracts that don't help the DoD fulfill its statutory purpose, right?
Hmm.
And so when we think about efficiency, it's easy to think, okay, contracts are going to get cut. But if you're on the contractor side trying to figure out, well, where do I fit within the grand scheme of things? Now, there's the most obvious targets. There's several EOs and things that are coming out of the White House that sort of shine light on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. But setting those aside, you know, the thing that contractors should be looking at least in my view, is how is what I'm doing for this particular contract helping this specific agency achieve its specific mission, right? And I think there's a lot of contracts that actually help agencies, achieve their specific missions. It's just the ability of the contractor to be able to voice that to the
Articulate. Yeah.
KO if and when necessary. Because you have to remember, as much as these changes are impacting contractors, it is 10 times as worse on the inside of government, because not only do they have to deal
Hmm.
with these changes, they're also dealing with rifts and people retiring and people
Yeah.
leaving or people being furloughed or whatever. So you've got, an environment that's like sort of, no one kind of knows what they're doing. And it's not to say that they don't know left from right. It's that a lot of the executive orders and actions and things that are coming down from memos and guidance are left open to interpretation. And so you have
Hmm.
a contracting base that's kind of like, okay, like how do we deal with this, right? And so, I think we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but when we think about efficiency, we're thinking of narrowing the core focus of whatever agency you're dealing with, whom you're or with which you're dealing, and then going another step further and saying, okay, what can I do to help my agency counterparts to prove to them, to the best of my ability, that what I am doing is helping them facilitate other communications internally that says like this is a contract worth saving, or this is a contract that fulfills an important mission, and that can be a whole host of things. But without getting into procurement specificities, I think painting this with a broad stroke, I think that's kind of a way to look at it, because
Yeah.
it seems like the government's taking an axe, and so the question is how do we help our government officials sort of um, swing at either different objects or use a a finer
Scalpel.
tuned instrument. Yeah. I'm trying to be a little bit diplomatic here because it's difficult to speak on these things because it's
Well,
easy to use.
and that's the beauty of this podcast is it's unfiltered strategies. So, Josh,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
giving you carte blanche right to just kind of be, really frank about things. And I make no bones about, like how I stand on things from a very diplomatic perspective too. However, I think the government has kind of deviated from contracts that support the core mission. And that's like one of the conversations, a lot of the conversations that I'm having with our customers
Hmm.
is, when they're kind of concerned about contracts going away and things like that. I'm like, this administration is making us go back to really kind of taking a cold, hard look and assessing, what is truly mission critical. And
Hmm.
there has been a lot of fluff. There has been this huge bloat in the government, and it's not sustainable. I kind of almost kind of look at the government like the housing market, right? Like I've moved from DC to
Hmm.
Texas, and we moved at the height before the bubble burst, before all of that happened. And so it's kind of like timing the whole situation with GovCon is almost kind of looking at the real estate market sometime like when's that bubble going to burst, or how long is it going to be able to sustain, like this type of growth. And unfortunately, we're kind of like facing the music right now. And it is very unfortunate for some of our
Hmm.
colleagues in the industry. Um, but I am a true optimist in that I think from an optimistic perspective, it's we're kind of going back to basics a little bit. We're kind of going back to true contracting, true mission. What is the government here to kind of support and do? And it's we all have a different philosophy about that, and even common terms like efficiency. What does efficiency kind of mean to DOGE, to this administration, to each one of us. And we all kind of see it sometimes from a different set of optics.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, one easy topic that I don't say it's easy, but one area in which two folks could see something from the different point of view and both be right is like the foreign assistance, right? Because you have
Mm,
um, a lot of that's being gutted, sort of USAID is kind of coming down, but there are folks on the other side that say, look, I mean, there's things that the United States and America and American values can do through foreign assistance to have Western views and ideas and thoughts being transmitted overseas. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not America first, but from that perspective, yeah, it serves a purpose, right? But you have
right.
folks that may be on the other side that say, well, if it's not 100%, focusing on what we need to do today, but and so there's a lot of the times it's people are speaking to the same thing, but just they're so
It's a
far
little
apart and they don't
nuanced.
realize it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more that you guys have in common than you realize, and it's a little bit more, I think, nuanced than just doing this. But at the
Yep.
same time, when you've got you know um, an administration that's beating the mandate drum, you know, in order to fix what's going on, I think one of the things that they're thinking about is speed, right? And so you're
Hmm.
getting caught up in this, you know,
Frantic kind
there's
of
the
pace.
only way to do it. Yeah, the only way to do this is to rip off the band-aid, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do it that way, there's no other way you can sort of rein in the government spending and sort of attack some of these broader principles of uh, the national debt and all this other stuff, which I'm not an expert on. But at the base level, you've got folks that are like, well, it can work in the business side. Why can't that work in the
Mm-hmm.
government side, and then how do we kind of attack that? So it's as much as it is causing chaos and confusion and problems, it is also creating opportunity for the
Yeah.
contractors that can read through, like read between the lines, see what's actually happening, recalibrate. It's a place where contractors need to reassess the new normal and take that as their institutional or strategic advantage. Like, okay, I may not agree with what's going on, but how can I acknowledge that this is a new reality and act accordingly? It may be to
Right.
to challenge actions, right? That going to court and putting up, you know, um, a legal challenge to things is by all means one way of doing it, and others will see, okay, well, how do I pivot my business, and whether it's looking into other verticals,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a company historically has done professional administrative support services, but they haven't really gotten farther into the IT side of
Yeah.
things, and maybe they're seeing that they may need to pivot in order to sort of, obviously it's protectionist. You don't want to, risk uh, going under as a going concern, right? You want to kind of be growing revenues and people, but if your divisions or sources of revenue over here are potentially at risk, you need to think about how you can, and it may be also not just governmental work, but looking towards the commercial sector. How do you diversify your portfolio that way? And so I think companies that have that top of mind are going to be the ones that sort of are at the forefront of the next wave of whatever's going to happen, which I think we all are kind of trying to waiting and seeing what's going to happen. But we have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
We can kind of see the dotted line in the future, right? But whether or not what we think is going to happen actually transpires is another thing. But if we can use
Yeah.
what's happening now as the basis for planning for future events, then it's those who fail to plan to fail, right? So.
Yeah, we can extrapolate where we potentially might be going, but it is hard. It is hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, this is almost reminiscent of sequestration and BRAC, and so it's all cyclical. We will survive the storm. Don't quite know what's going to be on the other side at this point.